Hello and welcome to Property Matters here on Dublin South FM. You can contact the show on Twitter, Facebook or LinkedIn at iPropertyRadio, or indeed email hello@iPropertyRadio.com. Your host for today is myself, Carol Tallon, and I'm delighted to be joined by Brian O'Brien, CEO and architect at Opoplan. So Brian, thank you so much for joining us today. Opoplan, what is that?
Hi Carol, thank you for having me on the show. So Opoplan is the world's first automated virtual architect for simple buildings. And we have found a way to automate what architects do on more simple buildings. And we're starting with the American house market, which is a house plans market, which is a very big and very established market. I really believe that an architect designed home is a huge benefit to the consumer and to the person and family. But unfortunately, only two to at best 10% or 8% of houses of single family houses are designed by architects. So I've always been very sort of shocked by that and surprised, and set out really a few years ago to see if there was a way to excuse me for my phone.
No, that's fine, no problem.
To try to solve that problem, and we've come up with a way to do that, and we're up and running. So we're very excited about that.
Brian, I'm going to have to take a few moments here to try understand the challenge here, because to me, what an architect brings is that individuality and looking at the site specific. So it's automating creativity at such a bespoke level. How do you even go about that?
I mean, that's a wonderful question, and it gets to the heart, I suppose, of why we think Opoplan is very disruptive and will change the industry. So my experience over 20 years as a client-facing architect, project by project, has been exactly what you said. It is a very bespoke, creative, iterative process. However, we do at the beginning of projects, and for simpler projects, a lot of what we do is actually quite systemized. The way we analyze where the sun is, where the view is, where the slope is. And I'm talking about simpler buildings, obviously. So we actually have found a way to do that. I'm obviously not going to reveal all of the ways that we do it underneath the hood. But the secret sauce is what we call a design decision system. And that then speaks to an analysis of the site and an analysis of the customer's brief, which they give us in our online interface. So they actually give us a lot of parameters. We then analyze those using techniques that we have turned into code, and then we take our system and we produce a design for them from a series of template designs and seed designs, and then we modify them and adjust them and deliver them to the customer. And they're a pretty good approximation of what an architect will do at the early stage. It is certainly not the entire process that an architect goes through, and it is absolutely not the equivalent of the full service an architect will do. But given that 90% of people don't really get to go near an architect at all, we think there's a huge market for that sort of Pareto principle type solution, the 80-20 solution, I guess.
Well, actually, that's really interesting, because I wasn't aware of those figures, as in of homes that are designed by an architect, as opposed to maybe a more engineered solution. But for Opoplan, who's the intended customer here?
So our customers are actually the end user, the end customer, the family that is building their own home. And it's very interesting. The American market is very different to the Irish market. We're sitting here in Ireland talking this through. But in the States, there's 1 million single family new homes built every year. About 40% of those are done by developers, and about 2 to 8%, depending on the figures, are designed by architects. So in between, we have around 500,000 that are designed by, or not designed at all, by somebody else, or not designed at all.
Would that be what we would say in Ireland? Are these self-builders?
Yeah, they sort of are self-builders, but really they're self-developers, in that they find a lot. They usually a property that's old, they tear it down, and then they bring in a builder to build a new home to a plan they found somewhere. And quite often online. There's a huge industry in the States of online plans. And that's really the industry we're going after, and we're trying to disrupt, because it's quite archaic. and it really doesn't use modern technology or analysis or AI or visualization. So we're really trying to get in there and help people to get a much better design that's much closer to the service they would get from an architect, but more importantly that, or as importantly, that it'll be closer to their budget or on their budget. It will fit on their site. Believe it or not, about half of the, over half of the houses that, house plans that people buy from online sources currently don't fit on their lot, and over 70% don't fit on their budget. And that is just not acceptable or necessary with the technology that's around and available now, and the technology we have. So that's sort of, and then most people don't really understand their plans anyway. So we are helping to bridge that gap by the fact that everything we do is in 3D. And it's a self-exploring 3D inside your own browser. So that's how we deliver our designs.
Okay, and actually, as somebody who I would fall into that category of not understanding the plans and having difficulty reading the plans, so actually immersive technologies and even kind of a 3D and you know, even CGI images to a certain extent, I find a great aid. But just, I suppose, to help us understand the problem a little bit more, why are people not engaging architects? Is it a value? Is it a cost issue? Or is it that they don't see the value if they have looked at a house and they think, I'd like this, take a photograph of it, send it to the builder and say, can you build me this? You know, is it a cost issue or a lack of understanding around the value?
I think it's a bit of both. But first to the numbers, in the States, there's at most about 200,000 architects. And we just said there's about 500,000 houses needing to be designed. So if every architect was doing 2 or 3 houses a year, they'd be doing nothing else. So there just aren't enough architects. And I suppose that's also because the fees that an architect needs to charge, and I understand why they need to charge them, are just not within the reach of most people who are trying to build a $200,000-300,000 home in the US. Now, there is huge parts of the US where people are spending a lot more money and they are bringing in architects, and those are more complex, larger cities or more expensive areas. So that's where a lot of the efforts that architects are involved is going. But the vast majority of the US is a much easier market for people to locate their own plan, bring it to their own local builder and build their own house. And that's what people are doing, 500,000 per year.
Brian, what's your own background? Have you worked in the States?
So I've actually had my own practice in Dublin with a great friend, Mike Haslam, Solar Earth Architecture, for close to 20 years, up to about 2 years ago. And I've also studied and worked in the US, so I know the US market very well. And did my master's over there, and we're getting a great exposure to it because the company is currently in the Skydeck incubator program out of the University of California, Berkeley as well. So we're very happy with that.
I can hear your dog in the background. No, you're fine. You know, this is one of the things that COVID has brought us. So I'm recording from our home office. My dogs are generally very quiet though, so I get to be a little bit smug about that. What kind of dog do you have there, Brian?
So we have a lovely a Swiss Shepherd, which we just got from a rescue about 3 months ago. Beautiful. And she's the sweetest thing, but she does bark when the postman comes. So that's what she just started, I suspect. Yeah.
No, do you know what? Actually, you know, we always talk about you know, moving towards a more holistic way of life. And actually, I think despite it happening through technology, I think COVID has really done that. It's actually broken down the parts of our lives because everything is converging. So actually, I always think it's a really interesting dynamic. So don't ever apologize. Don't ever apologize for kids or dogs, whatever about anything else.
Indeed.
But Brian, so you're coming from this with an understanding of how the marketplace there works. Do you think a solution like that would ever work in Ireland, or is this not a focus because
it's interesting? We talk about. I mean, there are very different challenges in Ireland. For instance, in the US, we say that in those areas outside the big cities, the barriers to build are very low, which is why we have focused our business over there. By which I mean, to build in most places, you need a permit. Not planning permission, you need a permit, and a permit takes a local engineer 2 or 3 hours, and it's literally a series of calculations about beams of traffic and so on. In Ireland, you actually do need a human being to sit down and do your planning application for you once the design is done. That said, we've found a huge demand from Irish people, so we have actually developed a service that's geared more towards Ireland called newhouseplans.ie, and that is serving some of our designs out to Irish customers ready, close enough to something that they can go and take to a planning application and at very good prices. So we've tried to address the Irish market through that, but the real focus on the technology and the automation is going towards Opoplan, which is the American market.
Yeah, and look, that completely makes sense. But just, you know, we touched on their cost being a barrier. So what's the cost? So say for somebody who is, you know, somebody in the US, they found their own lot. They're happy to work with an engineer to get their permit, or indeed to do it themselves. If they use Opoplan, you know, what's the likely cost implication for them?
So our service is actually, we say it's the automated virtual architect, and what that means is we're a design-centered service, but actually we're also a platform to manage your entire pre-build journey. So you would come in and we make your designs, your first designs, for free, so you can see them for a certain period of time for free in your browsers, in your immersive environment. And after a certain period of time, we start charging a subscription, and that subscription is around the $10 to $20 to $30 a month for you to keep accessing your platform and your designs and begin to make changes to them. And then when you are ready and you feel that it's time to take your designs and go and approach your builder or start getting your permit, you make the full purchase, and the full purchase is approximately $2,000, which is the price that the mid-price midpoint of our competitors. So that's where the price we're using at the moment. And for that, you get an architecture design set, which is what we in Ireland would call your outline design, beautiful drawings. And we also give directly to the builder a builder's layout set and builder's information set. So that's only given to your registered builder. And so we're obviously trying to create synergies there and future referrals from builders with that. And then there's a whole series of upsells that we also offer for additional prices. So augmented reality, 3D printable files, and various other higher technologies that really are synonymous and integrated to our core technology.
Brian, I don't want to take us off topic, but because you've touched on it there in terms of trying to design a solution for the Irish marketplace, our planning system in Ireland, does it work? Does it do the job it's supposed to?
It's a very complex question. I mean, I think the first thing I'd say is procedurally planning in Ireland is overly complex. There are, as we know, 26 counties, but there's something like 40 or 45 planning authorities or more. Many of them with different planning application forms, many with different approaches to validation, and so on. So I think it is actually very difficult for the ordinary person to go anywhere near even making a planning application, not to mind, getting to the point of a design before that. I think planning, I'm a great believer in the fact that planners are professional, and they're doing their best in a very difficult kind of context, I think. But the one thing that always strikes me is that planners, a planner I know once said that actually in Ireland we don't have planning, we have planning law. And that they're constantly trying to interpret the law, whereas planning, certainly that's true up to recently. I think I'm seeing changes now with the new planning office of the planning regulator and the more spatial strategies that have emerged in the last 5-10 years. So there is more of a holistic sense of things, but up until quite recently, it was very much about interpreting a policy that's written down, and that's when the country's divided up into 26 counties, and then many cities have their own planning authorities. It just gets very unwieldy, and it's hard to see the strategy in there, I suppose.
I don't want to put you in an unfair position here, but because your product is aimed at self-builders, that's something that urban planners would like to see outside of an urban context not happen at all.
Sure,
have we overcorrected?
And I think it's fair to say that our new designs can be built in suburbia. It is not only greenfield sites, and I know there's huge sustainability questions about building off in greenfield sites. But the reality is thousands of people are doing that every year in Ireland, and they're doing it in very poorly designed houses. And I know, because I'm often contacted to try to give people advice. Believe it or not, as part of the RAI charity event, I've just done more than 20 design clinics for people in the last month. And I've found the same questions coming up over and over again. We have this house, it just isn't working. Can you help us to figure out why it's not working, and to improve it? So there's a lot of houses that just aren't designed well, and we can improve that. So newhouseplans.ie isn't just about greenfield sites. You can do our designs in a replacement situation, in a suburban context or an urban context, or at the edge of town as well.
Actually, that's, you've answered a question that I've often thought about in my mind, and that is true. I think the RIAI design clinics, it's an amazing initiative, but I've often wondered, is it more existing homeowners who are looking to see what they can do with their existing home, or is it people who are thinking of purchasing a property, or at what stage? Who tends to come through the doors for those design?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, I was quite surprised at the demand. In my case, probably of those, I think I did well over 20. I just happened to have a few weeks where I was able to do that, and I sort of undertook it as a market research exercise for Opoplan and for new house plans as much as anything else. 3 or 4 of those families would have been trying to do a new build, and the rest were trying to do quite a medium or a radical overhaul to their house. So that was the sort of mix of it.
Very good. But did most of them already have their own home?
Most of them had their own home, yeah. Some of them, maybe 2 or 3, so 10-15% were looking to build on a new site that they had or had their own.
Okay, I think that's really interesting to hear you talk about that in the context of market research, or if you're going through accelerator programs, they probably term that client discovery.
Customer discovery.
Yeah, we've done our rounds of those, and that's always a really interesting one. So, whether the client discovery is in Ireland or in the US, we're hearing about trends post-COVID as a move away from open plan, even in our domestic homes. Is that something you've seen borne out?
Actually, I'm thinking of writing this up, because what I've been seeing from these clients is not borne out by that. I mean, I think what I would say is there's a need now for open plan plus, and the plus is actually we do need to be able to subdivide some spaces, and we do need extra spaces. Clearly, we need home office spaces, but possibly also one that's been coming up a lot is play spaces, play room for kids. I mean, I haven't heard of that in 30 or 40 years, since people have very big houses.
What do you mean, as in a separate space for kids?
Either a separate space, and the way I'm imagining it, and from talking to people, it's where there's a lovely carpet laid down, and the toys are brought out, and there's cabinets for the toys to be put back into at the end of the play session. So it's while the parents are maybe working at the other side of the room, and they kind of have the kids in one part of a space. They're able to work away and look over, and they can see that the child is safe and happy, and then move over to them whenever they need attention.
As opposed to having a separate playroom down the hall.
Yeah, or not having anything. So there's been that. But I certainly don't think open plan is dead by any means. I think open plan is it's open plan plus. We need open plan and something else now, other spaces.
I think that's a really good description of it, open plan plus, and maybe that plus is flexibility. So as in the flexibility is designed in. So whether it's sliding walls or even down to spaces that can be used as play space, but then cleared away entirely. That's a really interesting one, because throughout COVID there's been so much media commentary about what the response is likely to be, but it's too early to say what it is going to be. But through the design clinics and through the people making inquiries through Opoplan, you actually have good insight into where their mindset is right now in terms of their home.
We do really, yeah, because our entry point to Opoplan is actually a briefing system where the customers give us a brief, and it's a very nice interface developed on foot really of my years of experience of people coming in and having the cup of coffee in the architect's office, and people are so turned on at the point where they've got to the place where they're commissioning an architect for their house. There's huge enthusiasm, huge interest and engagement. So we've really tried to bring that into our online briefing system. And we've huge data coming out of the online briefing system over the last year when we've been in beta. And so we really know what people are looking for, and we've managed to parse that and analyze it. So there's a huge amount of data for trends underneath our system as well, which we'll eventually make available.
Yeah, I really hope that you do, actually, because that's what we're missing at the moment. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence or anecdotal commentary, and we don't really know where that's likely to fall for people at an individual level. So actually having access to that would be a really interesting one for you to publish. And so actually I look forward to seeing if that's what comes next. What is next for Opoplan?
So technologically, we're just about to launch the beta of our dashboard. So currently our briefing systems and our design engines work in beta, and that's up and running and has been for the last number of months. We're about to complete our first version of our platform, which is where you literally come to exchange ideas with other people in the same process and to store your budgets and lots of briefs that you've examined. So you'll be able to store all those there and link them to different designs, make design changes or seek design changes. So that's that. We're really just trying to accelerate the engagement of customers and users and continue to learn from them and learn how to make our systems better, add new, wider breadth of designs. Eventually we will go seeking investment, but right now we're not actively looking for investment. We're looking for advice. We're looking for people to help us with any insights they have. So that's where we are.
You know, that's funny when you say you're not looking for funding, but you are looking for advice. There is this old adage around VC funding for startups. This piece of advice: if you're looking for money, ask for advice. But if you're looking for advice, ask for money. Maybe there's something in that.
There is.
Brian, it's an interesting concept, and as you mentioned there, you are sitting on some really interesting information in terms of trends that I think would definitely be interesting to explore. If that was something you were open to, it was so interesting to see that data. But from one of the larger kind of takeaways from this conversation is maybe about the planning system in Ireland. We know there's changes afoot. What those changes are likely to be, we don't know. I don't think they're going to go down the route of making it easier for self-builders. That's, as a farmer's daughter who believes everybody should be able to live off grid in the fields, that's something I struggle with. But I know I'm in the minority. And
it does bring up a lot of difficult subjects, I think. But I mean, to be fair to planners, that there is a huge scale problem, and developers. We need a lot more housing supply, and it's not houses, it's housing, it's apartments, and we need to do something about the main streets of our towns. There's tens of thousands of potential units sitting above shops all over this country, and the benefits that would bring to the town, to the people. But there's city technical problems that can only be solved one by one, and that needs a system. That needs a grant system, a VAT relief system. But there's a lot of scope in there, and we can't always be looking to new build. There's a lot of assets sitting around empty.
Brian, you touched on something very important. Before we finish up, apartments are of course homes, but have we taken a step backwards in Ireland over the last week in the government maybe not acknowledging that?
I'm sort of trying to remember the whole justification for allowing the REITs and the other funds in, and I don't want to really go back there because I can't say I have a full grasp of it, but I do know that apartments, when designed well, and I think the mistake we made was about 3 years ago when we reduced the size of the apartments in the bottom of the recession, and that I think is a big problem. But apartments are only part of it, and if we look at our European friends that live in apartments all their whole lives, they have security of tenure, which we know. Not only that though, on every street corner there's a playground, and that's the pocket parks and playgrounds and public transport. Those are all the things you need. Of course, COVID really showed us we need to be able to get out of our houses as well. So the public realm and the city planning has to be work for the apartments as well. It's not just everything inside the gate of the development. So I think I'm quite passionate about city planning as well. And it seems to me that the whole thing of you should really not have to cross a main street to get to a playground if you're in an apartment. And a main street, I think, is, you know, more than two lanes of traffic, two rows of streets, carriages of traffic.
Yeah, you know, look, if there was one solution, it would be much easier to find it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, indeed.
The problem is there are so
Yeah.
many. Listen, Brian, thank you so much for being so generous with your time today. That
Wonderful.
was Brian O'Brien, CEO and architect of Opoplan. We need to take a quick break. Stay tuned.